I'm excited to have the both of you on, Vanessa Bennett and John Kim. John, I've been following you for a number of years. I was just telling you before we jumped into this that you were the guy that made me laugh my ass off as I was running down the green belt. Okay, some dude, he gets it and he's speaking it on Instagram. So I'm excited to actually meet you on screen. And then Vanessa, you were on our podcast in the past. So we're going to dive into relationships, midlife. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have a hard time even saying that word midlife because I feel like I'm going to live to 108. I don't know about anybody else, but so I'm not even midlife yet. But I want to dive into relationships, how to relationship better, which is also within your book that you both wrote, and also dating midlife. And then we're going to start talking about sex. Oh, this is exciting.
Hey, speaking of sex, if you don't mind, I'm going to take my pants off real quick because I just got off a motorcycle. I'm wearing sweats.
No, he's actually being honest.
I'm wearing sweats. They're a little too tight, and I ride a Harley. So I just got off the motorcycle.
He did.
And so the heat of the engine all over my, and so
my life, by the way.
So I'm going to take them off because, there's nothing worse than feeling uncomfortable when you're talking. It's going to come through in the content.
I'm right there with you.
Actually in his underwear.
And also, refreshing. Most people laugh at me, not with me. So thank you for that. It's refreshing to hear that someone is getting my dad jokes and all that. So yeah.
Are you kidding? I love it. I laugh with you all the time. You just don't hear me. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes I was pinging you. I was like, dude, this is great. This is great content. Keep going. So your book. Okay, let's dive into this because yes, I have your book. Yes, I've read your book. Yes, I love your book. Tell me, I want to start with, how did you two meet? Because this is always the big thing. Like, how the fuck do people meet each other at midlife? This is always the thing. Like, where do I meet people?
Well, John's story is that John's version of it is that it was a blind date. I mean, that's kind of true. The story that I tell is a little bit more in depth, and I'll make it short, but only because I think if we're talking about where do you meet people, I'm not a big, nor was I kind of in my single journey, a big dating app person, mostly because I'm really extroverted and I just like meeting people in the wild. And I don't find that difficult because I'm so extroverted. But I actually saw a friend of mine was following him on Instagram and she had been sending me stuff and I hadn't really thought about it. A friend that actually, Danae. And she had sent me something one day and I was just kind of like piqued, like, oh, that's interesting. And I went to his page and kind of scrolled way, way, way down. And I just said to her, I was like, I find him to be incredibly attractive. He lives in LA. He appears to be single and we have a mutual friend. And then I said to her, I'm going to date this guy. Oh. And she was like, okay. He has, I don't know at the time, like, let's say 80,000 followers or something. And I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm going to date this guy. I just had this, I had this knowing. And so
it didn't come from her desiring me. It came from like a spiritual place, like I
did desire you.
You did desire me, but it came from more of a place of like, there's something going on that's bigger than me.
Yeah, like it was a knowing. It was like in my body, So anyway, the friend and I had plans anyway to catch up, the mutual friend, and I was basically going to ask him to hook it up. And then before I ever even said anything, he was like, I have this friend that I feel like you'd really get along with. And I was like, oh, and it all just kind of transpired from there. So I guess I use that. I tell the details of that story because I think it's important to pay attention to those knowings. I think we have to kind of reach out and get what we want. Right.
Yeah.
You just gave me a side eye. But yeah, I think it's important, especially as women. Like, I think it's important for us to say, like, there's something here. I'm feeling some sort of way. I kind of got to like go out and put some effort behind it, and listen to those soul callings.
Yeah, that was the easy part, the meeting, the blind date.
That's right.
And then from there it got rocky. So that was really interesting. The guy that she went hiking with that said, hey, I know that this guy, he came up to me at the gym, gave me a chest bump and said, hey, do you like white girls? And I was like, dude, what do you mean? Yeah. I mean, I like all girls. And then he's like, I have a therapist for you. And I was like, I don't just date white therapists, but yeah, that was the beginning. And then I was trying to be single on purpose. And I've been in relationships most of my life. And I knew that, because now I was in my 40s. I met you at like 45,
right before your 45th birthday.
Yeah. So I was mid 40s and I thought, okay, I have one more chance at bat for debauchery. And I was like, I've never had a one night stand. I've never had a threesome. I've never had, I've never done drugs so I wanted to kind of do a little bit of that.
Which you should have done in your 20s, basically.
Yeah, I wanted to make up for my 20s. And then I didn't get far. And
it.
and because I met Vanessa, and then so my point is, I was ambivalent. I was kind of wasn't sure, and I knew that the next relationship I got into, it would be like a long one. Would be something I really invested in, and so I put a lot of weight on the promise instead of being present, and so she felt that. And so it was rocky for like, 6 months or so, 3 months, 6 months.
Well, it was definitely on touch and go for the first 6, but I think it was about 3 or 4 months in when I basically just sat him down. I was like, I'm done. Like, I know I'm amazing. I know this could be amazing. I'm not going to try to convince you of that because I don't need to convince anybody of that. I know it. You do you. And I told him, like, I don't want to talk for a week. I need a week to just be by myself. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. And it was after that week that he kind of came back around and was like, no, I really want to do this. I realize I've been in my head. And that didn't take it away, the ambivalence. I mean, there's been a bit of a dance, I think, that whole first year, but I feel very secure in, again, like choosing myself. I wasn't interested in playing games. Certain age, right? I think also I wasn't in my 20s anymore. I was like, nah.
Sara, are you single?
I am single.
So are you enjoying your singlehood, or are you kind of ready to invest in something?
I love my singlehood. I love my singlehood. However, I am definitely ready to invest in something. Yes.
Okay.
It's a yes and, right?
So what would it take for you if you met someone to no longer be single and invest? Would it be a feeling you have? Would it be a lot of just kind of logical things, or what would you do in this situation?
I am a whole body experience. So in other words, I listen to my heart, my head, my soul, my body. I listen to all of it. Yeah. And when I know, I know. Yeah. When I know, I know. I've also been betrayed on, which, I don't even know what is the percentage. It's crazy. It's a crazy amount of percentage of people that have been betrayed on. And so I got married very early as well. So I was married at 21, I believe, is when I got married. I was already a mom at 17. Yeah. I was a baby. And so my entire life was flipped upside down. So now I'm a single mom of 3 boys, right? And so I did all of that deep stuff, that parenting, the what you should be doing, quote, I say that in quotes, at a very young age. And so now I feel like my life, I've taken this time 10 years out. So my life imploded at 40. So having found out about my betrayals and my marriage and everything, going through that divorce, going through that healing, that personal growth. And now I feel like I'm on that other side of it where I'm like, okay, I'm independent. And yet I'm also ready for that partner to explore that second part of life with. Yeah. And I am the same as you, Vanessa. Like, I know what I want, and I also know what I'm willing to give, and what I also offer to somebody.
What I'm worth, right?
What I'm worth. And I want to continue down that path with deep personal growth with that next person that's ready to step into it.
Yes.
So
I don't have a soul and the head that I think with you guys don't have. So
dad jokes. That's always the dad jokes.
You're gonna get a lot of dad jokes.
I love that.
Yeah, well, but that's how we met, and it's been 5 years, and 5 years and a baby.
It's wild. I think the coolest thing about you two is that you show that side, right? It's not just like, I'm a therapist, and so I'm not going to show that side. You show it all. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. Like, it's the hard, it's the tough, it's the deep, it's all of it. So how are you with attachment? Let's talk about attachment, because I learned a lot about my freaking attachment and also codependency coming out of my relationship. And let's just call it how fucked up it was. And so how is your attachment with one another versus how it was in your past relationships? And how is that formed into where you're at today?
Well, I mean, it's like a work in progress, right? I think we're all swimming towards secure, as John would say. Attachment is not as fixed as a lot of people talk about it, being. It's definitely much more of a spectrum. It's also a little bit more fluid. So in this dynamic, for sure, I tend to show up on more of the avoidant side of the spectrum. John tends to show up more on the anxious side of the spectrum, but I've also been in relationships where that's been different, right? Because it's really activated by what relationship you're in. And so I think for us, it's been a 5-year and plus, right? We're still in it, to continue to understand it more deeply, lean into what makes us uncomfortable, and just continue to use each other. Use is maybe not a great word, but really use each other as part of our journey towards becoming more secure, right? Because a lot of it is like finding secure attachment in self,
right,
as an adult, right? Because we don't have that parental figure. And so obviously we don't want to make our partner that parental figure. And so a lot of it is actually finding secure attachment in self, but your partner is kind of that thing that you can jump off of to do that with, you know?
Yeah,
Right.
I think attachment styles and love languages, those have been the two big things that we've had to work through in our relationship. So I'm anxious, she's avoidant. Love languages, she's more acts of service. I'm more words of affirmation. I have this joke where if I wrote her name in the sky, she would be like, well, how much did you pay for that? You know? We're both touch, so that we kind of overlap there. But the way that we love each other and the way that we receive or want to receive love is different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for both of us, it's a new experience from our previous relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like riding a tandem bicycle, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And really learning, one person wants to go this way, where the other, like, balance. And so those were two of the things, the big things that we were, and we still kind of work through is attachment styles and love languages differences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My love language, which I didn't realize during if you have not, those of you listening, if you have not done this, go do it, because I'm telling you, I learned a lot about myself. My love language is acts of service, which makes sense why I would get super angry and anxious and resentful when I didn't feel like I was being taken care of, because I was taking care of everybody else. And I'm like, hello, why can't somebody just pick up something and help me? Do something for me when I need it done.
But I think what's so beautiful about love languages, so there's two things. One, obviously the newer research showing that what you find your love language being is a direct indication of what you probably didn't get in childhood, right?
Really?
So if you're an acts of service person, most likely you were probably pretty parentified. You were probably the one that was making sure everybody was good. You were taking care of everything around the house, and rarely felt like people were actually taking care of you or seeing you when you needed things, that it was your responsibility to make sure everybody else was taken care of, right? And so same with words. So if you're a words of affirmation person, you probably did not get the words and the positive reinforcement and the you're amazing and you can do this and you're strong and all those words that we do need as children. So what I love about it is when we talk about love languages, it's great to know. It's also not necessarily like, oh, well, here's my love language and you, partner, have to do this. Again, like attachment styles, it's a really good mirror to say, well, what didn't I get in childhood and how can I actually grow towards being able to establish more of a secure base in myself, right? So not expecting or needing somebody else to always check those boxes or fill me up, but also knowing that it's partly my responsibility too, to start to work towards how can I give myself the knowing that I'm seen and I'm taken care of and I've got me, as the fellow acts of service person talking to you.
Well, it's interesting because I'm the only girl and the youngest, and it completely makes sense. In fact, we have all boys in our family. We have one girl, all boys. How does this? So we're talking about, there's something that a lot of my friends have been talking about is hypervigilance versus hyperindependence. And one of the things that I noticed coming out of through my own journey is the hyperindependence piece, right? I had a part where I was literally like, I realize where I'm becoming hyperindependent. And, that's actually it's actually keeping me from healthy relationships. So when we're talking about being a better in relationships, how does that play into it?
Well, hyperindependence is really it's hyperindependence and codependency are just two sides of the same coin. So they're both used as a way to kind of keep people at arm's length and kind of hide and not get intimate, right? Not have a certain level of intimacy. And they just act out in different ways, or they kind of manifest in different ways and behaviors. And by the way, you can flip flop. So again, it depends on who you're in a relationship with. It depends on what your activation points are.
Wait a minute. So people who are listening, how is codependency something where you are avoiding in that way? Because most people see codependency as latching onto the person, no boundaries, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but latching on with no boundaries is not the same as intimacy, right? And so codependency is a way for me to be needed, but it doesn't mean that somebody sees me. It doesn't mean I allow myself to be seen for who I truly am. For most people with codependency, it's putting on a show. It's being a chameleon. I'm going to be what you need me to be or what you want me to be in order for you to love me and not abandon me, which is not authentic, right? And that's not you showing your true self. Intimacy is built through showing up as who you are authentically, and allowing the other person to see you authentically. Codependents don't do that. And neither do people in hyper-independency either.
Right.
So one might be a wall, right, which is the hyper-independent, and then one might be like the diffuse no boundaries, which is the codependency. But both of them are manifestations of a fear of abandonment. You're trying to protect yourself against a fear of abandonment, right? One is just saying, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to risk being abandoned. So I'm hyper-dependent. And one is saying, I'm going to change everything about myself in order to make sure you don't leave me, So it's basically two sides of the same coin.
John, what do you have to say about that?
He knows it's my jam too, which is why he
I can feel you over here.
I don't have anything to say. I mean, it's such a big topic.
Yeah, it is.
If you ask me a specific question, I could maybe offer something, but just in general.
How
less theory and more like specific, like helping somebody with a question, you mean?
Yeah, I'm more street and she's more theory. So I've always thought that codependency swings toward anxious. Like there's some like, because I'm an anxious, attachment. But then when I met Vanessa and she has struggled with codependency and she's an avoidant. So there was kind of a wrench thrown. Then I kind of like wanted to do a deeper dive on codependency. And so the way that she talks about codependency, I think is really interesting, which is why she's writing a book about it. It's not what I thought or what most people think.
Right.
People just think codependency means that you're like completely, losing your sense of self in someone else, attaching, you complete me and all that. But I'm realizing through Vanessa that that codependency is much more than that, and there's different rooms, if you will.
I think what's cool, just me sitting back here, I'm just going to state this with both of you, is the dance that you both have. And it's such a beautiful dance. So I want to commend both of you on that, because I think that so often in relationships, there's like this almost competition that starts to happen, right? And with both of you, there's this beautiful deepening that happens, right? Where you're like literally even just the way that you're watching one another. If you aren't watching this on YouTube, you should, because literally watching the both of you together is the coolest freaking thing.
Well, thank you, Sara. Yeah, I think we can fall into that sometimes. We both do the same work, and so for sure, I think there's a tendency for people to do that. I think that, I don't know, I'll just speak for myself. I think that maybe in the last year or so, also maybe the last couple of years, as I've also come into my own, I have felt a lot more, not that I didn't always feel supported by, but a lot more support by John in just like him being like, wow, like this is your jam. Like, this part. Right. And it feels really good as a partner when you're able to look at somebody like in their element and be like, wow, I'm really like impressed with you. Right. I mean, because kind of looking at somebody with that through the eyes of reverence is one of the most important things in a relationship. Yeah. Right. Respect and being inspired by, as like Esther Perel would say, are the two most important things. So I think it's always a really good opportunity when you can step back and look at your partner through the eyes of respect, to add to the building blocks of intimacy, really.
How has it been for both of you, looking at your past relationships and coming out of those past relationships? I'm assuming that you've had some rather unhealthy ones, because we all have.
You don't say.
To get to this healthy space. How has it been for you, having stepped out of those unhealthy relationships and now stepping into this? Was it scary? Because I know for a lot of people, it can be extremely scary looking at the possibility of actually having what you really have always desired.
Yeah, I think we stamp relationships as healthy or unhealthy very quickly, and we don't realize that there's parts of relationships, right? There were parts of my unhealthy relationship that were very healthy and that the connection was strong and all that. So when we just stamp something as unhealthy,
Right.
So I don't think that's fair to other relationships. And there's parts of Vanessa and I's relationship that are very healthy, and there's also parts of our relationship that are unhealthy, right? Just because, people aren't throwing chairs or assassinating character doesn't necessarily mean it's
like all good, all bad.
Right.
Yeah, it's not all good or all bad. So this has been, and I think it was meant to, right? This has been one of the most challenging. At the same time, this is a relationship where I feel like I've really turned the corner. Do you know what I'm saying?
Wow.
But it also might have to do with my age too, because at 26, you're not turning any quarter. You're just going into walls, right? There's only one gear. But I think being, because I met her at 45, I'm now 50. It's like I have no excuses anymore. I mean, especially because being a therapist, and I want to be the guy that I don't want to be the do as I say, not as I do person. So when I met Vanessa, I think it was intentional that we had a lot of differences. She's also a Taurus. I'm an Aries. We were like both bulls.
Very stubborn.
we're both very stubborn. And there was this clash, and we had to swim, in the book, we talk about swimming past the breakers. We had to swim past all that, and we continued to build this. And it wasn't easy, but I think the value of this, like if me and Vanessa's relationship ended tomorrow, this would be one where I look back and be like, I think I learned the most from this relationship.
Agreed.
Yeah. And Vanessa had it the best, but
you just slip that in there.
Well, he's sitting without his pants on right now too. I said, this is my
lunch. Well, you even said too in the book, there was a part where you said something about, meeting me was a little, I don't know if you use the word disarming, but this idea of like, also a therapist, also somebody who was really seeking and exploring and had the kind of EQ the language. And so it was like, oh no, I can't hide behind being the one that knows better.
It's easier to be the teacher that dates the student.
Yes.
And
I actually remember saying that like pretty early in the relationship, being like, I don't need you to save me. Like, just so we're clear, I'm good. I got me. So if that's like what the roles have been in the past, like that's not going to be the case now. And so I think he's right. Like there have been a lot of like locking horns in this relationship, not from like a ego place, but from more of like I'm establishing myself, you're establishing yourself. How do we move forward? Because dating at this age is a lot different than in your 20s. Because in your 20s, you don't know who the hell you are. No. Right. And so you're much more malleable and you kind of discover who you are through relationship. Whereas you meet somebody 45, for me, I'm a little bit younger. I'm 39 now. You're pretty established. Obviously you're looking to grow, but you're like, no, but I know what my values are, my worth, right? All that stuff. So it is different than like when we were young.
I want to remind you, the audience is on the edge of their seat waiting for the sex conversation.
Yeah, I know. Actually, so it's so funny, John, because I literally was like, let's talk sex.
Let's talk about sex.
Well, I also am scared they're going to be very disappointed after the conversation. They didn't say shit. They don't know anything.
They didn't say somebody literally that just came into my head too. I'm like, we got to start talking about sex. So let's dive into that, because I was listening to, what podcast were you on? I can't even remember. I was listening to one of them and you started talking about sex. And I was like, damn, I love this because it's something that we don't talk about. We don't talk about that for some reason. And I know for me, exploring in that area, I'm not one to go have one night stands myself. I just can't. Like, I need to have a soul level with somebody in order to have any kind of relationship sexually with somebody. That said, it's something that we don't really talk about. And so when it comes to relationships, and when you guys started diving into this part of your relationship, how has it changed for you in terms of intimacy, sex, diving deep with one another versus when you are in your 20s and it's just like, let's go just, I never did that because I was a mom right away and had a relationship right away.
Yeah.
But I also have a lot of friends that have had this conversation with me where it's like taking my guard down and being able to explore in that area has been very, very difficult for them. Clients as well. So let's talk about that.
When I first met Vanessa, because I'm a little kinky, we were making out and I said, hey, can I slap you a little bit? And she said, if you slap me, I'm going to slap you back.
True story.
I said, oh.
By the way, for those who don't know, I'm from New York.
I said, oh, okay, that kind of ruins the role play. It's not going to work. But Sarah, let me ask you real quick before we get into us. How important is sex to you now as
incredibly important.
Late 40s.
Incredibly important. Incredibly important.
Why and what does that importance look like?
So it's important for me because, again, like I just can't just jump into bed with somebody. That's just not what it is. For me, it's intimacy. For me, it's having that ability to look somebody in the eye and to see their soul and to make love with them. It's not, you know what I mean? It's like that deep, deep connection with somebody that I don't have right now. Right now, down the line, I will. And it's also something that I do absolutely desire, because I know, especially having done this work, this personal development work, and all this healing that I've gone through, what's possible on the other side of that. It's not just being in bed romping with somebody, right? For me, it's like that deeper level of connection.
And how often a week do you need this comment?
She's not in a relationship yet.
Well, she's visualizing.
I'm not in a relationship with somebody, but let me tell you something. So it's funny. I had this conversation with somebody that's very close to me, a guy, and we were talking about this. And women, I do find, especially in having the conversation about the people that he's been with, and also just with my close friends, I feel like we get more sexual beings as we age. I feel like for myself, I'm like, bring it on. I mean, I would be that multiple time a dayer, quite frankly. My kids are going to not listen to this.
Like, skip over parts, this through this.
Or maybe they will. I don't know. I don't give a shit. They know everything about me anyhow. But, I mean, it's definitely important to me. That said, again, I don't have it right now. So
I also think there's something to be said for, because even though, like, let's say, the majority of your listeners are a certain age, they're women, they're maybe on the other side of, failed. Well, I don't want to use the word failed because I hate that word, but ended or expired relationships. Especially nowadays, and especially in the places like the LAs and the New Yorks, women are having children later. Right. So having kids when you had kids is actually, like, in this area anyway, almost like it's not the norm. Right.
Yeah.
And I say that because as somebody who's 39, I have a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So my relationship to my body and sex as somebody who's, turning the quarter and 40, it's going to be a lot different than somebody who's got a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, or whatever. Right. And I'm sure for all the moms out there, even who have older children, they can probably remember those first few years where, you're very touched out, you're very overstimulated, you're so consumed with providing the kind of every aspect of need to a tiny human that you feel like you've got nothing left to give to yourself, let alone a partner romantically. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think for John and I, especially because there is an 11-year age difference, it has been part of our rub, which has been like, he's turning the corner. He's just turned 50. Meanwhile, I have a 3-year-old, and I'm like, we had a few years there where it was just like, I need everybody to leave me alone. I want to be in a dark deprivation chamber, with no stimulation. So I say that because I know there's going to be women out there who are going to be like, yep, I remember those days.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had those days too. My kids are getting older now. And so for me, it's this freedom of like play and, just let's go explore everything. Right. And I hope that actually gives hope to women as well, because I think that unfortunately we also go through this whole period of perimenopause, menopause. We go through all of that stuff. And there is hope for you, you know? And so, and there's this part of life, I think, that we also feel like it dies off, and it doesn't have to. There absolutely does not have to.
Yeah.
Vanessa's more quality over quantity. She's not a multiple times a dayer. Although we have, I think, once done multiple times in one day
before I had a child.
You had a child. I'm more, I'm highly sexual, and I'm more like, for me, it's like I see sex as a way of life, like an artist, right? Like I write, I do videos, I do podcasting, but it's all under the umbrella of living like an artist. So creating spaces where I can be creative, that's a non-negotiable for me, right? And so when it comes to sex, I used to kind of shame myself for being kind of highly sexual and kind of bouncing off the walls. But now I'm more embracing it, and it's just, it doesn't matter if it comes out in a sext, or if it comes out where you are having sex, or if it's coming out through flirtation. It doesn't matter how it comes out, how it ripples. But this idea of being a sexual being, like we are spiritual beings, right? That's kind of how I see sex and sexuality as kind of this. It's not something we do; it's who we are. It's our self-expression. And then with your partner, I mean, of course, there's going to be compromise because we may not match sometimes, and that's okay. So, this is where that dance comes in again, right? And of course, post having a child, I mean, I don't know what a woman goes through, but I can imagine. And then also from the man's perspective, it's important for there to be communication, because if she's touched out and she's not telling me, I could feel rejected, or I could feel like, oh, she's not into me or this anymore. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But because she communicates with me, and then I can gauge where she's at and what she's going through, then I can adjust myself, knowing what she's going through, instead of just pouting or getting frustrated or, all that.
I think that's been part of our conversations over the last few years. I mean, going back to kind of the codependency work that I focus so heavily on. I mean, I think that not a lot of women, I think every woman in this society, if you live in the patriarchy, this is the way you're raised, which is that, a man's sexual appetite is your responsibility. And your pleasure is not yours. Your body is not yours. And a lot of women are raised to believe that that's how they keep a partner. They have, it's their obligation to make sure a partner is happy. And it was something happened after having a daughter where there was just like a light bulb moment for me where I was like, nope, not anymore. Not doing that anymore. And so we have had a lot of like the last few years, there's been a lot of reckoning around sex in particular, because that, coupled with obviously having a little one, has really opened my eyes to a lot of ways that my entire life, it's always been in service of somebody else, right? And this idea of like reclaiming my body, reclaiming my sexuality, and essentially really standing behind like nobody is owed anything. Nobody. Right. You're not owed this, right? And if both people are not 100% on board, then that's it. It doesn't happen. And it's each person's responsibility to kind of self-soothe through that. Now, to John's point, yes, communication is imperative, because otherwise people are making up stories in their head. They're, holding on to resentments. They're feeling rejected, not knowing where you're coming from. But I think these are hard conversations. And I think there are conversations that are really important for people to be having, men and women especially, right? As we kind of move forward into this new age, because shit's changing.
Yes.
It's changing across the board,
Yes.
No one is owed sex, right? I agree with that. At the same time, well, also no one is owed emotional intelligence. No one is owed, intelligent conversations. No one. So they all impact the relationship, right? And so, yes, no one is owed this, in that you kind of have a responsibility to take care of yourself, and you can't. And also, if you force someone, or someone's doing something out of guilt, I mean, what would that look like? I don't want that, right? But there are consequences to disconnection, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and that can create drift, and that can create people wanting to say, okay, well, this is not for me, or whatever. It's a lot of navigation, and it's a lot of communication. I think, and I know this is generic, but I really think talking about it is really the bridge that's created for two people to walk across. If not, there's going to be anger and resentment, even if it's subtle, and then people feeling either rejected or unchosen. Like a lot in the beginning, if you just wanted to simplify, Vanessa didn't feel chosen because I was ambivalent, and then later I felt undesired because she doesn't. She's not a words person, She's not. And also, I think I was comparing old relationships and what I was used to, and then saying, okay, well, then you don't desire me, and that wasn't true. She just chose it in a different way.
Right. I think it's the reason I wanted to tap into this whole conversation about sex also is because I think it's been one of the coolest things has been being able to get in touch with my body now that I am turning 50 versus when I was 20, 30, 40, constantly giving my body to everybody else. Cause that's what I felt like I was doing. I was not all the time, but when you're in childbearing ages, you literally are having to be that person of giving of your body. And now it's finally like I'm at the stage of, oh, wait, this is mine.
Mine again.
Right?
Yeah.
This is mine again. Like I get to step into me again. And this is really cool.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to really dive into that with not only, personal development in terms of spiritual, mental, emotional, but like your body itself is such a freaking amazing vessel.
Agreed.
It's so cool.
Exploring together.
Exploring together. Yeah. I want to ask you, what do you consider to make up a really good relationship at this stage of your life? What would you, and even taking what you're going to say and what would you have told your younger self? What makes a really good relationship?
I'm going to say aligned values, number one. That's my most important.
Yeah, I'm going to be very kind of predictable and straight and blunt, but you go first.
I mean, values that are aligned, because I don't care if the sex is amazing. I don't care if the chemistry is amazing. I don't care if any of that other stuff is there. If you guys don't have shared values, then I don't know how you can build a future with somebody, right? So being really in touch with what your values are, what like John would say, your non-negotiables versus your preferences list, right? And I think for a lot of, I'll just speak for women, it takes a lifetime for us to figure out what those actually are. Because again, it's not something we're kind of taught when we're young to pay attention to. So a lot of women that are like my age and older are just now figuring out what their actual values are and holding themselves to it. So I would say values would be number one. I would say, for me, and I know this through experience now, somebody who values themselves and takes great pride in themselves. So emotional work, spiritual work, physical work, really kind of taking care of this entire vessel. And it's never going to be perfect. That's not what I mean, but somebody who's curious and wants to go deeper and, explore themselves and understand their triggers and the EQ, but not just EQ. Physical is very important to me too. I just think the way that you care and show love to yourself is going to be very indicative of how you're going to show care and show up for other people. Right. So those, I guess, are the two, probably for me, the most important.
Yeah. I think for me, it's being able to build something. So whether it is raising a child, building your empire, so having a growth mindset instead of fixed, the dance in not only the day-to-day, like, grocery shopping and dishes and stuff, but really building something. I think that's one of the sexiest things is you could do with someone is build something and look at it and be like, look what we made, know? So that's, and I'm going to say a really healthy sex life. And so that doesn't just mean sex, but flirting and, connection and chemistry. And, a lot of times you have to, fan the flames, as they say, right? So it's not just like based on animalistic chemistry, but it's based on effort, exploration, having an open mind. So, and that's just me. So, movement also, I don't think I could be with someone if they didn't move. So if they were just always on the couch and going outside or moving, whether it's fitness, yoga, whatever it is, if they didn't do that, there would be a huge disconnect because I'm moving all the time. So creativity, sexuality, sexual connection, and movement to me.
Was it hard for the both of you to write this book together?
It came out really fast. Really fast.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, damn.
Yeah. How'd you just kind of hit the ball back and forth?
Flowed. It was actually a really great. Yeah, we had a shared Google Doc, and we weren't like writing side by side. He would write a portion, I would kind of respond to it, or I would write a portion, and he would. And it was great. And I'll tell you what was interesting about it. Not that it was bad, but some of the parts that were harder were one of us kind of reading something the other person had written and being like, oh shit, I've never heard you talk about it in that way. Or
I was going to ask you that. That was my next question. Being like, what were you most surprised about?
Yeah, let's sit and process together.
The book's actually a great example of it's a telling of our relationship, or one of the strengths of our relationship, in that it came out naturally. We made something. We built this. Yeah. Right? So there wasn't a lot of arguing. There wasn't a lot of ego. It was us, two pistons pumping to move the engine forward. It wasn't easy in that there was stuff that she said, I said, that may have, hurt each other's feelings a little bit, whatever. But we knew it was for the greater, and that we knew that if it didn't make us uncomfortable, the book's probably not going to be good. So just being on the same page and creating something, and that being easy, is telling of the connection that does work, that are one of our strengths in our relationship.
Yeah, agreed.
What was the most surprising thing that you learned of each other in writing this? There's a pause.
I'm like,
what the hell?
Good question.
What? John, I'm sorry. Hold on. Was that a pause?
Like, John stumped? What?
You're stumped?
No, I'm not stumped. We're out of time. So I'm
we're going to use that as the excuse. I see.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I
don't know if everyone asked that. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there's anything that I learned through the book that I didn't maybe I already know. I mean, I know he's the kind of person that builds a bus while driving it. And so that was tough for me because I'm more of like I need the entire blueprint. I need to read through the directions before I build anything. And so that in and of itself and the way we worked, that was a little bit different for him because I think he would have banged the book out in a week. And I was like, slow your roll. I need some more time. But I don't know if there was something about you I discovered through the book.
The book was also kind of a catalyst to actually look at our issues.
We had to like dissect it, right? While we were writing about
since we're writing it, since it's already open, we're talking about it. Let's get into it. So
yeah. Okay. All right. So I wanted to what's that?
You like that deflection?
I mean, it's true.
I know.
I'm not the only guest who talks around questions. That's a normal thing.
Well, you definitely are the first one that's ever sat with your pants on. So
first for everything.
There's a first for everything. So I want to I want to ask one last question before we do end, and that is, what is something that you would have? Now, you kind of like went around this a little bit. What is something that you would have told yourself, your younger self, while you were in relationships, the relationships that you were in, that you wish you would have known?
Oh man, there's so many things. How old is my younger self? 20s, teens?
I'm gonna let you actually go with this one.
Do you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one that comes up for me first is don't try to change yourself to be accepted and loved. Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Like you're worthy of love regardless of how you show up. And so show up as authentically as you possibly can and let the chips fall where they may. It's not your responsibility to make sure that everything and everyone is good all the time. The chips are going to fall and that's okay. You'll be okay on the other side of it regardless.
I'm going to steal something from our friend Danae, and she says this often, is that nothing is promised, including in relationships, so appreciate the here and now and the today instead of what it could be, what you see it 5 years from now.
Yeah.
There was something that you said. There's two things, actually. Well, there's many things, but the both of you, I listened to both of your podcasts. And so if everybody has not listened to you or followed you, we're going to dive into that. You're going to give that because people really need to. One of the things, though, John, that you said, and I was on my paddleboard a few miles offshore when I was listening to a podcast episode that you were giving and that I was listening to, and you said, don't just look at the highlight reel, look at the documentary, because I think so often in our past relationships, we do look at the highlight reel and we go into this whole like, why didn't it work out or right? And it's the documentary. It's the entire thing that we need to look at and actually learn from. That was the one thing. And then the other thing that I love that you both have talked about is relationshiping together with, not at.
Yeah.
Where you're with one another. And that's one of the most beautiful things that I think that we can take from this. So
thank you. Yeah. Not at or around, but with.
Not at or around. That was it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
I can't believe you're listening to you have electronics in your phone in your hand while you're in the ocean. It must be good.
She's good enough where she's not worried about falling.
I don't fall in. I have my phone. And I call people on the phone. I do work out there. I paddle. I'm 4 miles offshore getting chased by sharks.
Wow. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Hanging with dolphins and whales.
Taking business calls while you're being chased.
I really am actually. I'm taking business calls while
that's where you should do all your content is actually in the ocean.
You a lot of my content out there. I do that in the mountains. I climb a lot of mountains. I'm like a mountaineer, and I do it out there too. It's pretty cool. I took my woofer certification in Idlewild. That's why I love the fact that you guys take your retreats out there. It's a great spiritual space. Beautiful space.
So when you're dating and want to find someone who's a good match for you, is that person has to at least somewhat match you as far as outdoors and being active and that, or no?
So, I've danced with that one, John. I've danced with that one because admittedly, I'm an extreme adventurer. To have somebody be extreme, what I would love is to have somebody that has their own space that can teach me their space while I can also bring them in and teach them my space.
Yes.
That they're willing and wanting to learn more about being on the water, being in the mountains. It doesn't mean that they can't, that they have to be doing it right now, but and maybe they would want to. So yeah, we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is really, really cool. So where can people find you? Tell us a little bit about, where can people dive into your content and you and your retreats and your book? And you've got another one. You're both writing new books, right? So give it all to our people.
Well, the current book that's out right now, the one that you're talking about is It's Not Me, It's You. And that's available wide. John, your handles are the same across the board.
Yeah, mine's easy. Just the Angry Therapist.
So I just
everywhere. I was not pithy enough because my handle started as my own personal back in 2012 when Instagram started, and then just became who I am now as I've transitioned in my life. So my Instagram, which is where I'm at mostly, is Vanessa S. Bennett. I'm on TikTok as the Coda Yoda. But mostly Instagram. I mean, obviously there's website, vanessabennett.com, but mostly Instagram for both of us is where you're going to find everything in our bio links. So we've got a couples retreat coming up in September. We're going to actually go up to Idlewild. So anything that you're looking for, I have a private online community, as does John. So we both got a bunch of things cooking and ways to connect and go deeper, depending on kind of who or what content resonates with you.
Like Tupac, just trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. That's what I've been doing for the last 15 years. I'm a Korean bodega. I sell texts. I sell pagers. I sell books.
Pagers.
Right. I remember somebody actually put in your oh God, I'm going to stop laughing, Sarah. But somebody actually responded to something that you said in one of your Instagram posts, and they said, "Do you really make money off this?" And your response was, "You're kidding?" Question mark.
I don't remember.
Because no.
I was laughing my ass off. I was like, dude, seriously, did you ask that question?
People do ask.
Of course. Hello, when you're good at what you do, come on. So, well, I want to thank the both of you for being on. And also, what is your podcast? Give your podcast, because your podcast.
Yeah. Well, his is the Angry Therapist podcast, and mine is called Cheaper Than Therapy.
Yep, both amazing. Go listen to them. Thank you, the both of you, for being on this podcast. I appreciate the both of you, and I know that there's a lot more here. So our paths are gonna continue to intersect. I'm not too far from you. You're not too far.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.